A 17-year-old black kid in a wet apron just gave away the only meal he'd saved 3 days to buy. To strangers. In the rain. And the strangers? They're worth $200 million. Here's what nobody in that diner knows yet. The broken-down car in the parking lot started on the first try. The lost wallet was never lost. And the elderly couple sitting booth number 7, soaking, yet looking desperate, ordering nothing but coffee, have a folder in that leather bag with this boy's name already printed on the cover. This was not an accident. This was a test, and he just passed it without knowing there was one. But passing the test is the easy part. What comes next? The betrayal, the fraud. The night his grandmother almost doesn't make it. The moment he has to choose silence and everything he's built. That's where the real story begins. The alarm clock on Caleb Ford's nightstand stopped working 3 months ago. He never replaced it. What if the night you gave away your dinner was done? Things changed. Caleb didn't know that yet. He was 17 years old, washing dishes for $8 an hour. And on this particular Tuesday in November, he had no idea he was walking into the most important moment of his life. His body just knows when to wake up. 5:30, every morning. Like something inside him decided a long time ago that sleeping in was a luxury belonging to a different kind of life. Not his. He sits up slow. The mattress springs complain. Same mattress since he was 9. Same springs complaining since he was 12. At some point, you stop hearing it. The floor is cold through his socks. He tiptoes past the door at the end of the hall. Not because he's afraid of waking her, because he knows she's already awake. Has been for an hour, probably. Lying in the dark, listening to him breathe through the wall, pretending to be asleep so he won't worry. Grandma Ruth does that. She thinks he doesn't know. He knows. The house on Garfield Street tells its story through every surface. Paint the color of old newspaper. Porch steps that sag in the middle, like they're tired of holding weight. Windows sealed against the Ohio winter with duct tape because new seals cost money. And money is the one thing this house has never had enough of. But it's clean. Spotless, actually. Ruth sees to that. Because being poor, she always says, doesn't mean being ashamed. Caleb stands in the kitchen and lines up the coins from the table. $1, 50 cents, 25 cents. 75 is the cost of one bus ride, and he only has enough for one direction. He'll walk home tonight. 3 miles. Fine. He's walked farther for less. He checks on Ruth before he leaves. Her door's cracked 2 inches, the way it always is. The oxygen tank hums its low, steady note beside her recliner. She's in the bed now, facing the wall, shoulders rising and falling. He watches her breathe for a moment. Then he goes. Denton's Diner sits at the corner of 5th and Maple, and at 6 a.m. It smells like burnt coffee and something that might be hope or might just be bacon grease. Big Ray Okafor is already behind the counter when Caleb comes in through the back. Big Ray is a large man with a small smile and a very specific way of looking at the world. He nods at Caleb. That's it, just a nod. But here's the thing about that nod. It's been the same one every morning for 8 months. Same angle, same weight. And Caleb has come to understand that it means, I see you. I know what it costs you to be here. Keep going. Ray doesn't say that. He just nods. Some people communicate in silences. That means. Brenda is already working the floor. Brenda has been working the floor at Denton's since before Caleb was born, and she moves through the tables like water moving around rocks. Efficient, unhurried. She catches his eye and tips her chin toward the dish station. 3 hours of work before school. Caleb rolls up his sleeves. The dish station has a window, maybe 10 inches by 12, positioned at shoulder height so that if he stands just right, he can see out into the parking lot while he works. He watches people. That's the thing nobody knows about Caleb Ford. He watches carefully. The construction crew that comes in at 6:15 every Tuesday, still wearing yesterday's mud on their boots. The woman in the silver sedan who orders black coffee, wheat toast, no butter every Thursday, and tips exactly 15%, not a cent more or less. The old man who comes in alone on Sunday mornings and nurses the single cup for 90 minutes, like he's not ready to go back to wherever home is. Caleb watches all of them. He thinks about their lives, the weight they carry, the things they never say out loud. His hands move through hot water and dish soap, and somewhere in the back of his mind, always there is a number. $847. That's what Ruth's prescriptions cost last month. Diabetes medication, blood pressure pills, arthritis medication that helps a little but not enough. Oxygen tank rental, $847 that has to come from somewhere every single month without fail. Because without those prescriptions, Ruth is in trouble. And without Ruth, Caleb isn't sure what he is exactly. The water gets cold. He adds more hot. Keeps working. Jefferson High is a brick building on the east side of Harlow that looks exactly like what it is. A school that hasn't had enough money in 20 years, trying very hard to pretend otherwise. The computers in the lab are from 2009. Some screens carry a faint yellow tinge, like old photographs. Half the keyboards are missing at least one key. The science lab runs on equipment a retired teacher donated in 2014, and that equipment was already old when she donated it. But the teachers are something else. Ms. Elaine Pruitt teaches English on the second floor in a room where the radiator taps against its own pipes like someone trying to get in. She has been teaching at Jefferson High for 19 years. She has seen a lot of students come through that door. She knows within the first 2 weeks. Some kids are there because they have to be. Some kids are there because they have nowhere else to go. And then, very rarely, maybe once every few years, there's a kid who is there because something inside them is reaching, stretching, trying to get to something they can't quite name yet. Caleb Ford is that kid. Miss Pruitt has known it since September. She starts leaving things on his desk. Casual. Like she forgot them there by accident. A brochure for a business administration program at the state university. A flyer about a scholarship deadline. A newspaper article about a community development project in Columbus. Caleb picks them up. He reads them in the bathroom between classes where nobody can see. Then he folds them carefully and puts them in the bottom of his backpack, underneath the textbooks. Because wanting something and believing you can have it are two completely different things. And Caleb Ford has learned the hard way not to want things he can't afford. Lunch is peanut butter on white bread, eaten in the library where it's quiet and he can read without anyone asking questions. He tutors 2 freshmen on Mondays and Wednesdays during this period. No payment. Because they're struggling and he can help, and that seems like reason enough. Javon finds him on Thursdays. Javon has been Caleb's best friend since 3rd grade, which means Javon has watched Caleb be responsible and Carol quietly exhausted for about 9 years now, and Javon's primary coping mechanism for this is sarcasm. You know, most people eat lunch with other people, Javon says, dropping into the chair across from him. I am eating with another person. I just got here. Then we're eating together. Problem solved. Javon steals half the sandwich. Caleb lets him. This is also part of a 9-year pattern. Pruitt leave anything on your decks today? Scholarship application. You fill it out? Pause. Not yet. Javon looks at him with the expression he reserves for moments when Caleb is being stubborn in a way that looks at practicality. You have a 4-0. You work 30 hours a week and you still have a 4. You tutor half the freshman class for free. You're literally the most qualified person in this building for any scholarship that's ever existed. It's complicated. It's not complicated. You just don't believe you'll get it. Caleb doesn't answer, which is more or less an answer. November rain in Harlow doesn't just fall. It attacks. Mean and relentless and personal, like it's specifically targeting you. The night it starts is a Tuesday. Caleb has been saving for 3 days. This is the fact that matters most. 3 days, no snacks, no vending machine. He walked both ways to school every day, 6 miles daily, 18 miles total over 3 days. The reason, he wanted one real meal. Not peanut butter on white bread, not whatever Brenda sets aside for him at the end of his shift. A meal he chose, a meal he sat down for like a customer. $11. That's what he saved. Enough for the burger and fries at Denton's, $9.50, plus a dollar tip for Brenda, with 50 cents left over. Tonight he sits at the counter, not the dish station. Different view from here. You can see the whole floor instead of just the parking lot. And that's when he sees them. They're in booth number 7, the corner booth, the one usually reserved for birthday celebrations and anniversary dinners. Tonight, it holds 2 people who look completely out of place. Old, white-haired, wearing clothes that were expensive before the rain got to them because they are wet. Both of them. Thoroughly, systematically soaked in the way that only happens when you've been walking in the rain for a significant distance. The woman has silver hair and the kind of face that was once beautiful and is now something better, more interesting, lined with experience. She has a leather portfolio pressed against her chest, like she's protecting it from the weather. The man sits perfect straight, despite everything. The posture of someone taught long ago that how you hold yourself in difficulty says everything about who you are. 2 coffees on the table, that's all. 2 coffees, and they've been sitting here for over an hour. Caleb watches the woman open her handbag. She searches through it, closes it, opens it again, methodical at first, then faster. Then, with a particular kind of controlled panic that belongs to people not used to not finding what they're looking for. Nothing. The man pats his coat pockets, front side and inside. Then his pants pockets, then back to the coat. He pulls out a pocket watch, gold, clearly old, the kind passed down through generations. Looks at it like money might appear behind its face. Nothing. Caleb can't hear what they're saying, but he can read it. He's been reading people through that 10-inch window for 8 months. Brenda goes to their table with the check. Her walk is careful. The walk of someone who has delivered bad news before and knows the only way to do it is gently but honestly. She sets the check between them, says something. The woman's face changes in a way Caleb recognizes from the inside. Humiliation. The quiet humiliation of a person who has always been able to handle things and suddenly, inexplicably, cannot. The man speaks. His voice carries just enough for Caleb to catch pieces, something about their car. Route 9. Walking in the rain. The payphone outside that's been broken for 2 years, and nobody's replaced. Big Ray comes out from the kitchen. Arms crossed. Not unkind, just real. Denton's runs on margins too thin for exceptions, and Ray is a man who has made peace with that because the alternative is closing his doors, and if he closes his doors, nobody eats. Look, Ray says, I wish I could help. The man sets his gold pocket watch on the table. Collateral. Ray shakes his head, slow, regretful. The woman gathers herself, stands, takes her husband's arm. They move toward the door with a dignity that costs them something. Caleb can see what it costs. The man's hand reaches the door handle. Rain hammers the glass like punishment. Caleb looks down at his food. Burger, fries, Nilers, 50 worth of 3 days of walking. He looks at the door. He looks at his food. He doesn't think about it for very long. He doesn't weigh the options or calculate the loss. He just stands up. Because that's what you do. Hold on. His voice comes out steadier than he feels. He crosses the floor in about 10 steps. The couple turns. The woman's eyes are red at the edges, whether from embarrassment or cold rain he can't tell. The man looks up at him with pale blue eyes, doing something Caleb can't quite read. Not gratitude, not yet. Something sharper. Tonight's on me, Caleb says. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. Oh, sweetheart, the woman's voice catches. That's very kind, but we couldn't possibly. Please. He sets his tray on their table and slides into the seat across from them before anyone can argue. My grandma always says the only thing that gets bigger when you give it away is kindness. The man is still watching him. Still doing that thing with his eyes. Son, the man says, slow, careful. This is your meal, and I can earn another one. Caleb flags Brenda down. Can you get them some fresh coffee? And maybe use the kitchen phone to call about their car. Dale over at Hicks Auto does emergency tows. He's fair. Brenda looks at him for a long moment. Then she goes. The man's name is Walter. The woman is Dorothy. They don't offer last names yet. That's fine. Dorothy's hands shake a little when she reaches for the food, and she tries to hide it, and Caleb pretends not to notice because that's the kindest thing he can do right now. "We haven't eaten since this morning," she says quietly. Almost an apology. "Cars break down," Caleb says. "Happens to everyone." Walter is still watching him. "You work here? After school?" "Yes, sir. Washing dishes. Mostly. What else?" Caleb considers the question. Watching people. Thinking about things. What kind of things? And here's where it gets strange. Because Walter asks like he actually wants to know. Not small talk. Not polite curiosity. He asks like a man who has been looking for something very specific for a very long time and is now checking to see if this might be it. So Caleb tells him. He tells him about the Riverside Mall, 15 acres on the east side of Harlow, abandoned for 9 years, chain-link fence around it now, weeds coming up through the cracked asphalt. He tells him about the bus ride to the nearest medical clinic, 40 minutes each way, which means half a day of work lost for people who can't afford to lose half a day. He tells him about the computers at Jefferson High, the ones with yellow-tinted screens and keyboards missing keys. He tells him what it might look like if the mall wasn't empty anymore. Then he stops himself. "Sorry, I don't know why I'm telling you all that." "Because I asked," Walter says simply. Dorothy shifts the leather portfolio in her lap. For just a second, the flap opens. Official documents inside, dense and formal, the kind with embossed seals. And in the corner of one page, a logo, gold, a shape Caleb has definitely seen somewhere. He just can't place where. Then Dale comes in from outside, rain dripping off his jacket, and Walter stands. The change is immediate, like watching someone put on a different suit without actually changing clothes. The man who sat across from Caleb for the past 20 minutes, patient and listening, is still there in body. But something in his bearing shifts, straightens. The voice that comes out is not the voice of a man who was stranded tonight. "How long for the car?" Direct, no preamble. Dale blinks. Depends on what's wrong with it, sir, might need to." "How long?" "Hour, maybe less." "Fine." Walter reaches into his coat pocket, produces a wallet. Not a thin wallet. A wallet that has clearly never had cause to wonder whether it was adequate for any situation. He pays Dale without hesitation, without counting, without any of the careful deliberation of a man who lost his wallet tonight. Caleb watches this, files it away. At the door, Walter pauses, turns back. "Your name," he says, full name, Caleb Ford. Walter reaches into his breast pocket. Brings out a card case, leather with brass corners, opens it. Then, for a reason Caleb can't explain, closes it again. Reaches instead for a paper napkin from the dispenser on the table. Writes on it with a pen from his pocket. Caleb Ford, Garfield Street, deliberate, like he's writing something that matters. "Thank you," Dorothy says. She's looking at him with an expression he can't categorize. Like she wants to say more, but is choosing not to. "Thank you," Walter says differently. Lower. They go out into the rain. The door swings shut. Brenda slides into the seat across from Caleb. Sets a fresh plate in front of him. Ray's doing. The plate has a slice of apple pie on it that wasn't part of any arrangement. 15 years I've worked here," she says. "Never seen anything like that." "Like what?" "You know like what." Big Ray appears from the kitchen. Stands at the end of the table. Looks at Caleb for a moment. "Kid," he says, "what you did tonight took something real. It was a burger." That's not what it was. He goes back to the kitchen. Caleb eats his dinner. Second dinner, technically. Alone in the quiet diner, while the rain works its way down the windows and the strange feeling he can't name gets louder instead of quieter. Something happened here. He doesn't know what yet. The next morning, Dale comes in for coffee before his shift. Caleb is at the dish station. Brenda is at the counter. The morning rush hasn't started, so when Dale begins talking, every word comes through the pass-through window clearly. "Strangest thing about that car last night," Dale says. Brenda pours his coffee. "Yeah, started right up. First try. Battery was fine. Everything was fine. Maybe it stalled and reset, maybe." Dale wraps both hands around the mug. "But there was already a guy there when I pulled up, standing next to the car. dressed in an office suit. In the rain, just standing there. Brenda's face does something careful. And the old man who said he lost his wallet. He paid me cash right on the spot. Didn't even look in the wallet first. Just reached in and pulled it out. Brenda sets the coffee pot down. Looks at the pass-through. Caleb is looking back through it. Nobody says anything. He thinks about it all day. Through first period. Through the hallway between second and third. Through lunch in the library where he usually reads, but today just holding a peanut butter sandwich and a question he can't answer. The wallet that was there the whole time. The car that started right up. The man in the office suit standing in the rain next to a car that didn't need him. And Dorothy's portfolio, that logo, gold, a shape he's seen somewhere, where Javan finds him at his locker just before fourth period. Phone already out. His voice is doing the thing, the tone that means something happened and he can barely contain it. You need to see this right now. He holds up the screen. A news article from the Columbus Dispatch, dated 6 weeks ago. Brig, ha, 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 ha. The Briggs Foundation, valued at approximately $200 million, has confirmed it's conducting private community assessments in select Ohio cities as part of what sources describe as the organization's most ambitious development initiative to date. Foundation CEO Walter Briggs, known for his intensely private approach to philanthropy, is said to be personally involved in the assessment process. Caleb reads the sentence again. Walter Briggs. His eyes go to the small photo embedded in the article, the foundation logo. Gold, that shape. The same shape from Dorothy's portfolio. Walter Briggs, Javan says. See, that's the old man from the diner. You bought dinner for one of the richest men in Ohio. Caleb doesn't speak. $200 million. $200 million. That doesn't necessarily mean the car that started right up. Yeah, the wallet that appeared out of nowhere. Yeah, the guy in the suit standing in the rain. Javan. They were testing you. The words land in the hallway between them and sit there. Caleb looks at his locker. At the combination lock he's been opening since freshman year. A dent in the bottom corner from when someone slammed into it 3 years ago, and nobody ever fixed it. He doesn't know how to respond, because the alternative that those two people were genuinely stranded and genuinely embarrassed and genuinely helped by a $9.50 burger felt true, felt human, felt like the kind of thing that actually happens in the world. And now Javan is telling him it was a test. Which means either they're telling the truth or the alternative is. And Caleb Ford has learned over 17 years that when something seems too good to be true, it usually is. Miss Pruitt finds him after sixth period. Caleb, can I see you for a minute? Her classroom, after everyone else has left. She stands at her desk like she's choosing words, which is unusual for a woman who makes her living arranging them. I got a phone call this morning, says. About you. He waits. They knew your GPA. They knew you work at Denton's. They knew you help Mrs. Hicks carry her groceries home every Tuesday. They knew you tutor students during your lunch break without being asked. She pauses. They weren't asking if you're a good student, Caleb. They were asking if you're a good person. The room is quiet except for the radiator tapping against its pipes. Do you know who called? He asks. They said Briggs Foundation. He nods. Caleb, she looks at him steadily. Whatever this is, I want you to take it seriously. He looks at the stack of scholarship brochures on her desk. I always take things seriously, he says. I know you do. She sits down. That's the problem sometimes. Taking things seriously and believing you deserve them are not the same thing. He goes home. Doesn't say anything to Ruth. Not yet. This announcement comes the next morning. He's at the dish station. 7:12 a.m. First wave of breakfast orders. The morning is ordinary in every way. The coffee smell, the plates, cease of Brenda calling table down numbers, the November cold still pressed against the windows. Then school starts. At 8:47 a.m., the intercom crackles. Caleb Ford, please report to the principal's office. The homeroom goes quiet. Not dramatically. Just that held breath, kind of quiet when something is about to happen, and everyone senses it before they know what it is. Caleb closes his notebook. In 6 years at Jefferson High, he has never been called to the principal's office. Not once. He sees them through the glass before the secretary opens the door. Walter and Dorothy's Briggs, sitting across from Principal Dawson's desk like they've been in rooms like this 100 times. Walter wears a dark suit. No trace of last night's rain. Dorothy's coat is immaculate. Her leather portfolio sits on the chair beside her. On Principal Dawson's desk, a folder, thick, his school photo paper clipped to the outside cover. Caleb Foford, candidate, assessment. Caleb stops in the doorway. The secretary closes the door behind him. Walter stands. "Hello again," he says, and Caleb's voice when it comes is very steady. He'll be proud of that later. "You lied to me. Not a question." Walter doesn't flinch. "We created a situation." That's the same thing. It isn't. He says it simply. No apology, no defensiveness. Just a man who has thought carefully about this distinction. Everything you did was real. Your choice was real. That's the only thing that matters. Caleb looks at Dorothy. She looks back at him. Something in her eyes that might be apology, might be admiration, might be both at once. "Sit down," Principal Dawson says quietly. "Please," he sits. Walter opens the folder, page after page, academic transcript, work evaluations from Big Ray, formally written and stamped, character references from Miss Pruitt and 3 other teachers. Photographs. Caleb helping Mrs. Hicks with her groceries. Caleb at the library tutoring session. Photographs. They have photographs. "We've been in Harlow for 9 days, Walter says. "We started hearing your name on the 3rd day. From teachers, from neighbors, from your employer. From a woman named Mrs. Hicks who said you're the first young man she's trusted since her sons moved away." Caleb says nothing. "The Briggs Foundation is launching the largest community development initiative in our history. We have identified Harlow as one of 3 target cities. But we don't build facilities to disappear. We partner with someone local. Someone Sinkton's understands the community from the inside. Someone whose character we can trust completely." Dorothy opens her portfolio. Architectural drawings, full color, detailed. The rendering shows a building on land, recognizes immediately. The shape of it, the location at the corner of Riverside and 4th. The old mall. 15 acres, Dorothy says. Currently zoned commercial, already secured. Medical clinic on the ground floor. Computer lab and job training programs on the 2nd. A commercial kitchen for culinary training. Library. Community meeting spaces throughout. Caleb looks at the drawings, at the vision of what that empty parking lot, those boarded windows, that chain-link fence could become. Then he looks at the name on the building's facade. 3 words, Caleb Ford Dalmo Community Center. The room is quiet. Full scholarship, Walter says. Any accredited university you choose. Tuition, housing, books, living expenses. 4 years completely covered. He pauses. Summer internships with our foundation. Learning how these centers actually function. Grant management, program development, community outreach. Another pause. After graduation, you return to Harlow as assistant director of this facility. 2 years working alongside our established team. And then, if both parties agree, you become director. Full authority, your vision, your community. Caleb still hasn't spoken. He's looking at the drawing, at the name. Why me? He finally says. Walter sits back. Because transformation has to come from inside. We can build buildings, fund programs, hire staff, but we cannot manufacture what you already have. Which is what? You see, would be, Dorothy says quietly, instead of only what is. Walter leans forward. And you give away your last meal to strangers because it's the right thing to do. Not because anyone is watching. Not because there's anything in it for you, Caleb. Thinks about the 18 miles he walked this week. About Ruth's oxygen tank. About the yellow screened computers at Jefferson High. About an empty mall that's been empty for 9 years. There's a condition, Dorothy says. I know, Caleb says. She raises an eyebrow. You're going to tell me I can't do this for the money. or the recognition. He looks at them, because the moment it stops being about the community, it stops working. Dorothy is quiet for a moment. "That's exactly right," she says. Walter slides a business card across the desk. Heavy cardstock, the gold logo embossed in the corner. 2 weeks, he says. Think about it. Talk to your grandmother. Visit our center in Detroit. Talk to the director there. She started exactly where you are. He stands. And for just a moment, as Walter Briggs looks at Caleb Ford, 17 years old, grandson of a woman with an oxygen tank and an unshakable belief in generosity, something moves behind those pale blue eyes. Not calculation this time. Something older. Something that looks, if Caleb had to name it, like a man recognizing something he lost and spent a very long time looking for. "Regardless of what you decide," Walter says, "what you did Tuesday night belongs to you. Nothing changes that." They leave. Principal Dawson lets out a long breath. Caleb sits in the chair across from his principal's desk and looks at the business card in his hand. His name is on a building. He hasn't decided anything yet. But his name is on a building, and somewhere across town, in a recliner with an oxygen tank humming beside her, Grandma Ruth is waiting for him to come home so she can ask how his day was. He's going to need a minute before he can answer that. Outside Jefferson High, the November rain has finally stopped. The sky is pale gray, Ohio afternoon, clouds deciding what to do next. Caleb Ford stands on the front steps with a business card in his hand and 18 miles of walking in his legs and a future he can't quite look at directly yet. Like the sun after a long time in a dark room. He'll look at it, just not yet. He puts the card in his pocket. Starts toward home. 2 weeks. Walter Briggs gave him 2 weeks to decide. Caleb gave himself 3 days, not because he was impulsive. Not because he didn't take it seriously. Because he already knew the answer on the walk home from Jefferson High that afternoon, and 3 days was the time he needed to make sure the answer wasn't coming from the wrong place. Fear is fast. Hope is slow. Caleb had learned the difference watching Ruth navigate both for 17 years, and he was not going to make a decision this size from the fast place. So he waited. Day 1, he went to work. Washed dishes. Watched the parking lot through the 10-inch window. Thought about architectural drawings spread across Principal Dawson's desk. The medical clinic. The computer lab. The words above the entrance that appeared every time he closed his eyes. Day 2. He went to the library after school and looked up everything he could find about the Briggs Foundation. 19 years of operation. 31 community centers across 8 states. Programs that worked. Not the kind that looked good in press releases and disappeared after 3 years. Directors who stayed. Communities that changed. Real numbers, real outcomes. Day 3, he sat at the kitchen table after Ruth fell asleep and spread out every brochure Ms. Pruitt had given him all semester. State University. Business Administration. 4 years. Tuition that would take 30 years to pay back on a ditchwasher's salary. Or 4 years covered completely. He picked up Walter Briggs' business card, set it down, picked it up again, called the number on the back. Ruth's reaction was not what he expected. He told her everything, the whole thing. The test, the folder with his name on it, drawings, the offer, the scholarship, the building. He laid it all on the kitchen table like evidence and tossed her face while he talked. She listened without interrupting. Which unusual for Ruth, who had opinions and was not shy about them. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Grandma, I'm thinking, more quiet." The oxygen tank hummed. "This man," she said finally, "Walter Briggs." "Yes, ma'am." "He lied to you. He created a situation. That's what he lied." Her voice was not angry. Just precise. "I'm not saying that to tell you no. I'm saying it says because you need to know what you're walking into. The man lies when he thinks the end justifies it." She looked at him. "Do you trust him?" Caleb thought about it honestly. "Not completely," he said. "Not yet." She nodded. Slow. "That's the right answer. You're not going to tell me what to do?" "Caleb." She reached across the table, took his hand in both of hers, her fingers thin and paper dry and warm. "I've been telling you what to do since you were 4 years old. You don't need me to tell you what to do anymore. She squeezed once. You need me to tell you that I believe you'll do it right. He looked at her hands. I believe you'll do it right, she said. Javon was a different conversation entirely. They were at the basketball court behind the community rec building. The one with cracked asphalt and a hoop with no net, which is where they'd been having serious conversations since 8th grade, because something about being outside made hard things easier to say. Caleb told him about the offer. Javon bounced the ball 3 times, stopped, bounced it once more, stopped again. You're going to do it, Javon said. Not a question. Good. Pause. That's it? Just good? Javon caught the ball against his hip. Looked at Caleb with the expression Caleb had known since they were 8. The one that meant Javon was about to say something true that was also going to be uncomfortable. They chose you because you're easy to control, Javon said. A broke kid who's grateful doesn't ask hard questions. There it was. Javon. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying know what it is. He bounced the ball again. Rich people don't give away $25 million without wanting something back. Figure out what they want back. Make sure you can live with it. Caleb thought about that for a long time. Bounced the ball himself. What if what they want back is just results? He said slowly. What if they actually just want the community to be better? Javon looked at him. Then they'd be the first ones ever, Javon said. He passed the ball back. They played until dark. No score, no teams. Just 2 friends shooting at a hoop with no net while the Ohio evening came down around them and the streetlights on Garfield blinked on one by one. The drive to Detroit took 3 hours and 40 minutes. Walter had arranged it. A car at 7 a.m. A driver who didn't speak much, a folder on the back seat with an address and a name, Director Aziz Obi. East Side Detroit Community Resource Center. The center was on a street that looked, from the outside, like a street Caleb knew. The geography of American neighborhoods that didn't get what they needed for long enough that the neglect became architectural. Boarded windows on the building next door. A laundromat that had seen better decades, a corner store with bars on the glass. But the center itself, glass. Model lines. A building that said someone believed something different was possible here, which Caleb was beginning to understand was the whole point. Aziz Obi was 36 years old and had the posture of someone who had learned early that a room would not automatically make space for her. And it had decided somewhere along the way to stop waiting for rooms to change their minds. She shook his hand. Strong grip, direct eye contact. Caleb Ford, she said, I've been expecting you. Walter told you I was coming. Walter tells me everything useful and nothing personal. She led him through the main entrance. That's his style. Come on, I'll walk you through. The center had been open for 4 years. 2,800 people served annually. Medical clinic, computer lab, job training, a culinary program that had placed 63 graduates in food service employment in 2 years. Numbers that were real. Caleb walked through each floor, asked questions. A Daisy answered everything directly without dressing anything up. This is the grant filing room, she said, opening a door to a small office stacked with binders. You'll learn to love this room, or tolerate it. There's no third option. How long did it take you to figure out what you were doing? I'm still figuring it out. She stopped walking, looked at him. That never goes away. Anyone who tells you otherwise is either lying or they stopped growing. Did Walter? Caleb paused. Did it feel like this when he offered it to you, like the ground was moving? Adize was quiet for a moment. Walter didn't offer it to me, she said. I applied, through normal channels. Built my credentials for 6 years first. She started walking again. You're different. You're younger. And he came to you, which he's never done before in 20 years of running this foundation. Caleb stopped. Never? Never. She turned around. So whatever you did at that diner, whatever you showed him, it mattered more than you know. She studied his face. The question isn't whether the opportunity is real. It is. The question is whether you understand what you're agreeing to. Which is what? To be the person who stays, she said simply. when it gets hard. When the funding is complicated and the contractors are difficult and the community you're trying to serve doesn't trust you yet, because why would they? You stay. She's looked at him steadily. Can you do that? Caleb thought about every morning he'd gotten out of bed without an alarm. Every mile he'd walked because bus fare had to go somewhere more necessary than his own transportation. Every night at the kitchen table with the bills he didn't open in front of Ruth. Yes, he said. She nodded once, then call Walter. Tell him yes, he called on the drive home. Walter picked up on the second ring. Yes, Caleb said, a pause. Yes to what, specifically? Walter said, which was such a Walter Briggs thing to say. Yes to everything, Caleb said. The scholarship, the internships, the center, all of it. Another pause, shorter this time. Good, Walter said. That was it. Good. Caleb sat in the back of the car watching Ohio go past the window and tried to understand what his life had just become. State University was 2 hours south of Harlow. Move-in day was a Sunday in late August, bright and sharp, the kind of day that makes Ohio look like it was designed for beginnings. Caleb had one duffel bag and a backpack. The students around him had cars packed to the ceiling, parents carrying mini refrigerators and decorative pillows and all the physical evidence of lives that had surplus in them. He found his room, set on the edge of the bed, small, clean his. He had never had a room that was only his. On Garfield Street, he had a room that shared a wall with Ruth's, that looked out at the neighbor's fence. That was also where he kept his backpack and textbooks and the folded brochures from the bottom of his bag. This room was his. He sat there for a while. Then he unpacked, made the bed with sheets bought at the dollar store on the way out of Harlow, put his textbooks on the desk, went to orientation, started the work. The first thing Caleb learned about the nonprofit world was that it was a world, complete with its own language, its own unspoken rules, its own hierarchies that had nothing to do with the hierarchies anyone admitted to. He sat in lectures about grant cycles and program evaluation and stakeholder engagement and took careful and understood most of it quickly because he was good at understanding things quickly. What took longer was understanding the room. He was usually the only black student at the table, sometimes the only one in the building. Not always, but often enough that he became aware of it, the way you become aware of a sound that was always there, but you only just started hearing. The moments when he spoke in a meeting and someone nodded politely and then turned to the person next to them and said essentially the same thing and got a different reception. The moments when people asked him questions about what communities like is needed, as if he were a representative of a category rather than a person with his own specific knowledge. He noted these things, filed them, did not let them slow him down, because slowing down was not an option. It had never been an option. Caleb Ford had been built by circumstances and by Ruth's particular brand of love into someone who did not get to stop. Most days that felt like strength. Some days it felt like something else. The summer internships were in Detroit with a Daisy. She put him to work immediately and without ceremony, which he appreciated. No orientation period. No settling in. She handed him a stack of grant applications on his first day and said, "Read all of these. Tell me which 3 we should prioritize and why by Thursday." He read all of them, told her by Wednesday. She disagreed with one of his choices. They argued about it for 40 minutes. He changed his mind about part of it. She changed her mind about part of it. They landed on an answer better than either of their starting positions. "You argue well," she said afterward. "My grandma taught me. Smart woman, you have no idea." He learned grant writing, budget management, community outreach, the art of explaining circumstances to people who have seen many things claim to matter. He learned that the difference between a program that helps and a program that lasts is not money. It's trust. And trust is built one conversation at a time, slowly without shortcuts. He called Ruth every evening. She always answered on the second ring. She told him about her day, the neighbors, something funny at the pharmacy, She asked about his work, and he told her the interesting parts. And she asked sharp questions that reminded him every time that Shees was one of the smartest people he had ever known. She did not tell him her blood pressure had been running high for 3 months. He did not know to ask. 3 summers in Detroit, 3 school years in Columbus. The work got deeper each time he came back to it. Each summer he understood more of what Adaze did and why. And by his 3rd summer, she was assigning him projects without checkpoints, trusting him to run them and bring back results. That trust felt different from Walter's trust. Walter's trust had been given based on a Tuesday night and a folder of evidence. Adaze's trust was built slowly, earned in increments, and it felt more solid because of that. He thought about this sometimes, about the different ways trust works, but about what it means to earn something versus what it means to be given something, about whether there was a difference in the end, or whether the only thing that mattered was what you did with it after. He thought it about Javon's words on the basketball court. Figure out what they want back. Make sure you can live with it. He thought it was beginning to understand what they wanted back. Not control. Not a grateful face on a building with their name in the letterhead. They wanted the thing to work. Actually work. For real people in a real community, that was something he could live with. More than that, that was something he already wanted. He was 21 when he found out about Gorman Brothers. 3rd year of university. The Harlow construction project had begun the previous fall. Caleb was back for the summer, splitting time between the job site and the foundation's regional office, learning the construction side of things, because Walter had insisted that a director who didn't understand how a building went up was a director who could be fooled. He was right about that. Caleb had been reviewing invoices for 6 weeks when he noticed it. Small things first. A materials order larger than the quantity delivered. A labor invoice for work completed on a day when site photos showed the crew wasn't there. He flagged it, double-checked his math, triple-checked, went back further. The pattern was consistent and it was old. Gorman Brothers Construction had been billing the Bridge Foundation for work not done, materials not supplied, labor not provided. Small amounts in individual transactions, significant in aggregate, $340,000. Over 14 months, $340,000 that was supposed to go into the building, into the medical clinic, into the computer lab, into the community that had been waiting 9 years for the empty mall to become some self. Caleb sat with the numbers for 2 days, made sure he was right. He was right. He took it to Simmons. Richard Simmons had been Walter Briggs's director of operations for 22 years. He was 52 years old, efficient, and carried the air of someone who had solved many problems and preferred to solve quietly. He wore the same expression for every situation, the expression of a man who had seen everything and been surprised by nothing. Caleb laid the invoices out on his desk, organized, referenced, clear. Simmons looked at them for a long time. You're sure about these numbers? I checked them 3 times. I'll look into it. When? A slight pause. When I have time to do it properly. Gorman is still active on the site. I know. Every week their active is more. I said I'll look into it. Simmons looked at him, not unkindly, but firmly. You did well to bring this to me. Let me handle it from here. You're still learning how these situations work. Caleb picked up his folder. All right, he said, went back to his desk. 1 week passed. Nothing changed. Gorman Brothers was still on site, still billing. Simmons had not, as far as Caleb could determine, done anything with the information. A week became 8 days. 9. Kyleman. Caleb stared at the construction site from the regional office window. Watched the workers moving around the skeleton of a building that was supposed to become something important. Watched the invoices come in with numbers that didn't match the reality of what was going up out there. He called Adaze. I found $340,000 in fraudulent billing from the general contractor, he said. I reported it to Simmons 9 days ago. Nothing has happened. Silence on her end. Adaze. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about what you're going to do next. Her voice was careful. There are two options. One of them is easier. One of them is right. They are not the same option. Caleb already knew what she was going to say. If I go over Simmons, he said slowly, I'm cutting across 22 years of relationship between him and Walter. I'm 21 years old. I've been with the foundation for 3 summers. Yes, he could make things very difficult for me. Yes. If I stay quiet, what happens? He didn't wait for her to answer. $340,000 disappears from a community that hasn't had anything for 9 years, he said. And I become the kind of person who stays quiet about that. Silence. Caleb, Ade said, if you stay quiet this time, you will stay quiet next time. Because the next time will be easier. And the time after that easier than that. Until one day you look in the mirror and you don't see what you used to see. A pause. Don't do that to yourself. He hung up, sat for a while. Then he called Walter Briggs's direct line. Walter arrived in Harlow the next morning. They met in the regional office, just the two of them, no. Simmons. Caleb laid out everything. The invoices, the site photos, the timeline, the math. He was calm. No trembling voice, no emotional preamble. Just the evidence and the conclusion. Walter listened without speaking for 20 minutes. When Caleb finished, Walter was quiet. Long enough that Caleb's certainty began to wobble slightly at the edges. Not in the facts were solid, but in what came next. He was 21 years old, sitting across from a man who had been doing this for 20 years, and the 22-year relationship between that man and Simmons was sitting in the room with them, whether anyone said its name or not. Then Walter said, I've known about Simmons for 3 days. Caleb went very still. I received an anonymous tip, Walter continued. Financial irregularities, general contractor. I started my own review. He looked at Caleb across the table. I was waiting to see what you would do with it. The room had a particular weight to it now. Another test, Caleb said. A necessary one. How many tests are there? Walter held his gaze. As many as it takes to know whether the person I'm trusting with $25 million is who I think they are. He leaned forward slightly. You found it yourself, verified it yourself, took it up the chain. When the chain didn't act, you went over it. With evidence. Without drama. He paused. That's what leadership looks like. What happens to Simmons? He resigned this morning. Walter's voice didn't change. Gorman Brothers is terminated effective immediately. We'll recover what we can through insurance and legal action. He stood. You'll work directly with the replacement contractor from here forward. Caleb nodded. Stood, Walter stopped him at the door. Son. The same weight the word had carried in Principal Dawson's office 4 years ago. What you did at that diner was the first test. This was the second. The first told me your heart. This one told me your spine. Caleb Aitlock walked into the Ohio summer. Stood in the parking lot. His hands were not shaking. He checked. Good. 3 weeks later, Dorothy Briggs called him. Not Walter, Dorothy. I'd like to take you to dinner, she said. Just us. No business. He drove back to Harlow on a Friday evening, and they sat at Denton's together. Not booth 7. A different table. The one by the front window, where the afternoon light came in at a low angle in October. Dorothy ordered coffee and pie. Caleb ordered the same. For a while, they talked about his classes, about Detroit, about what he'd learned from a Gedesi. Then Dorothy set her fork down. I want to tell you something about Walter, she said, that he would never tell you himself. Caleb waited. Walter grew up in South Columbus, she said. His father worked in a machine shop. Good man. Hard worker. When Walter was 19, his father had an accident at the shop. Lost 2 fingers on his right hand. Couldn't work for 4 months. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. They lost the car. Without it, Walter's father was going to lose the job entirely when he recovered. They'd already used everything they had. Caleb sat very still. A man came by one afternoon, Dorothy continued. A neighbor they barely knew. A black man. Name that Walter never caught clearly. He paid the garbage bill, the whole thing. Wouldn't hear any argument. Just paid it. Said one thing when Walter tried to thank him. She paused. Pay it forward. The diner was quiet around them. Brenda was at the far end of the counter, not looking over. Walter spent years trying to find him, Dorothy said. To thank him properly. He never did. The man had moved by the time Walter had anything to offer back. She looked up from her cup. He built the foundation because of that afternoon. Every center, every program, every candidate he's ever evaluated. She paused. He's been looking for that man for 50 years. Caleb thought about a stranger in a driveway in South Columbus in 1972. Thought about what it meant for one anonymous act of decency to become 19 centers across 8 states. Caleb is the first his person in 20 years, Dorothy said gratefully, that Walter has cried over after reading their file. He looked at her. He doesn't know I'm telling you this. She held his gaze. I'm telling you because you need to understand what you're carrying. This isn't just your community you're building. It's the end of a story that started before you were born. The coffee was cold. Neither of them touched it. That man in the driveway, Caleb said slowly. He never knew what it became. No, Dorothy said. He didn't, so he never got to see it. She was quiet. Almost never, she said, softly almost. He drove back to Columbus that night, stopped at a rest stop on Route 33s, and sat with the engine off for a while. Thought about a man he had never met. Thought about an afternoon in 1972 that changed everything, quietly, without anyone knowing it was changing anything at all. Thought about Javon saying, figure out what they want back. What Walter wanted back wasn't control, wasn't gratitude, wasn't a community center with the right name attached to it for the press releases. He wanted a sentence someone else started 50 years ago. And he needed to be the one who finished it. Ruth called him early the next morning. Except it wasn't Ruth. The number was Ruth's, but the voice was Mrs. Patterson from next door, speaking in the careful tone of someone trying to stay calm about something that isn't calm. Caleb, honey, your grandma is at Harlow General. She's stable, but you should come. The drive back was 3 hours. It felt longer than that. He ran through every phone call with Ruth in the past 6 months. Every time he'd asked how she was feeling, and she'd said fine, or good, or better than yesterday. Every time the oxygen tank had hummed in the background, and he'd thought, good, she has it, she's managing, she's okay. She had been skipping insulin for 4 months. The prescription had gotten more expensive in January, a formulary change, something bureaucratic and cold, and Ruth had done the math on her fixed income and had quietly, without telling anyone, started cutting her doses to make the bottle last longer. 4 months of half doses. 4 months of blood sugar running twice what it should. 4 months of telling him she was fine on the phone every night. Harlow General. Room 114. 2:47 a.m. Ruth was asleep when it got there, smaller than he remembered, which didn't make sense because it had only been 6 weeks since he'd been home. But there she was, smaller in the hospital bed, the monitors doing their steady work around her. He sat in the chair beside the bed, took her hand, the hand that had cooked his meals and braided his hair when he was small and counted coins on the kitchen table and held his face. His mother's accident was explained to him for the first time. The hand that had squeezed his across the table when she said, I believe you'll do it right. The monitors hummed. His hands were not shaking. He checked. They were, actually. Just a little. He let them. She woke around 4 a.m., found him there, did not look surprised. You drove back, she said. Of course I drove back. I told Mrs. Patterson not to. Ruth, she was quiet. Why didn't you tell me about the insulin? A long pause. Because I didn't want you to worry, she said. Like the logic was airtight. You didn't want me to worry. You have enough on your... Ruth. He kept his voice steady. You were rationing your insulin for 4 months and you didn't tell me. I was managing. You're in the hospital. I'm stable now. That's not the point. She looked at him. Her eyes in the low hospital light were exactly as they had always been, clear, steady. A little stubborn. Caleb, she said, I watched you walk out of this town with one bag and a full ride to university because you have something in you that most people wait their whole lives to find. I was not going to be the thing that slowed you down. You're not a thing. You know what I mean. I know what you mean, and it's wrong. Silence. The monitor beeped. You're the reason I have anything to offer that community, he said. His voice had gone quieter. Everything in me that's worth anything. That's you. That's 17 years of you. He looked at her. You don't get to disappear into the background of your own story, Grandma. Ruth looked at the ceiling. For a moment, she looked exactly her age. 73, tired, human. I didn't want to need things, she said quietly. Not from you. Too late, he said. I need things from you too. I need you to still be here. The room was very quiet. Okay, she said finally. Very small, very real, okay? Okay, she turned her head to look at him. Don't gloat, I'm not gloating. You look like you're gloating. That's just my face. And she laughed, which turned into a cough, which turned back into a laugh, and Caleb's sat in the plastic chair at 4A, holding her hand while the monitors did their work, and the hallway stayed quiet, and he thought, this is what everything is for. Not the building, not the scholarship, not the name above the entrance. This woman, this hand, this room. Everything else is how you earn the right to still be here. The prescription situation was solved within a week. Walter, when Caleb told him what had happened, made 2 phone calls. A patient advocacy organization. A pharmaceutical assistance program Ruth should have qualified for years ago, and hadn't because no one had told her it existed. The monthly cost dropped to $11. $11. Ruth had been rationing insulin for 4 months because of a system she hadn't known how to navigate, and the solution, once someone with Walter's resources turned their attention to it, took 48 hours. Caleb sat with that, with what it meant. That the difference between managing and not managing for millions of people was often not resources. It was information, navigation, knowing which door to knock on and having enough standing to knock on it. That was what the center was for. Not charity. Navigation. He stood outside the construction site on a Thursday afternoon in October, 21 years old, watching a building go up where a parking lot used to be. He thought about the man in the driveway in South Columbus. The one who paid a garage bill and said, pay it forward, and walked back into the rest of his life without knowing what he'd see started. He thought about what it means to do something that matters, without knowing what that matters. Without an audience, without a building with your name on it. Just because someone needed something, and you had it. And that was enough reason. So his senior year was the hardest. Not academically. He could handle that. But in every other way, the weight of what was coming, the size of the responsibility, the specific loneliness of being the youngest person in every room he entered, while simultaneously being the person say everyone was depending on. He called Adazes on a Wednesday night in February. I don't know if I'm ready, he said. For any of it. To go back to Harlow and actually run this thing. You've been running it, Adazes said. For 2 years. From school. From Detroit, from that construction site. What do you think you've been doing? That was preparation. No, she said. That was the job. The job doesn't start when you walk through a door with a title. It started the night you gave a stranger your dinner. She paused. You're not preparing to do this, Caleb. You're already doing it. He sat with that. What if I fail? He said. Then you'll have failed while trying to make your community better. Which is not failure. That's the work. He was quiet. And you won't fail, she added. You don't know that. I know what I've watched you do for 3 years. A pause. Get some sleep. You've got a building open. He graduated on a Saturday in May. Ruth was in the 3rd row. She had taken the bus down the night before and stayed with a cousin. And she wore the good dress she wore to church at Easter, and she had Sudzoxoxid tossing, and she did not need it, because somewhere between the hospital in October and this gymnasium in May, her numbers had stabilized and her color had come back. And she had started teaching a cooking class at the neighborhood rec center on Thursday afternoons. When they called his name, she stood up. She was the first person standing, before the applause, before anyone else had decided. Ruth Ford stood up in the third row in her Easter dress, and she clapped for her grandson, and Caleb saw her from the stage and had to look at a point above the crowd for a moment. Because some things you do not get to fall apart over on a stage in front of 4,000 people. You hold it. You hold it until later. The drive back to Harlow was just the two of them. She slept in the passenger seat most of the way. He drove through Ohio afternoon light, through towns whose names he knew by heart, toward a city he was born in and left and was coming back to with different hands than the ones he'd left with. Not softer. He'd wondered about that once, whether the hands of people who went to college got softer. His hadn't. But they knew different things now. They'd held grant applications and site blueprints and a woman's hand in a hospital room at 4A, and a business card with a gold logo that had started everything. Different work. Same hands. Ruth woke up 40 minutes from home. Looked out the window at the flat Ohio fields going by. "You ready?" she said. He thought about a daisy. About Walter and Dorothy in a diner booth in the rain. About a man in South Columbus in 1972 who never knew what he started. "I think so," he said. She nodded. Looked back out the window. "Good," she said. The car moved through the afternoon light, through the geography of coming home, toward a building with his name on the front that was finished now. Ready. Time. The building was finished on a Monday. Caleb drove past it 3 times before he stopped, just to look. Just to let it be real for a few minutes, before he had to go inside and deal with the 16 things on his desk, and the contractor walkthrough at 2, and the community board meeting at 5. 3 times around the block, slowly. Because the Caleb Ford Community Center was standing where a dead parking lot used to be, and it was real, and it was glass and morning light, and it had his name on the front in letters taller than he was, and some part of him, the part that used to line up $1. 75 in coins on a kitchen table before dawn, still could not fully take in that this was the same city, the same block, this east side that had been quietly falling apart for 20 years. Same city. Different story. He parked the car, went inside, got to work. Opening day was the second Saturday in June. Harlow turned out, not just East Side, the whole city. People who had read about the center in the Gazette, and people who had watched the building go up from their morning commute, and people who had heard about it from a neighbor, and people who had no reason to be there except that something new had opened, and new things don't open in East Side very often, so you go. The line stretched around the block by 9 in the morning. Caleb stood inside the main entrance and watched it through the glass and felt some things he didn't have an immediate word for. Not pride, exactly. Pride was too simple and too clean for what this was. Something more layered. Something that had Ruth in it, and Javon, and the 10-inch window at Denton's, and 18 miles of walking, and a Tuesday night in November when it was raining, and he stood up without thinking about it. Something that felt like everything being worth it. All of it. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts. Ruth arrived at 10:15. Mrs. Patterson drove her. Ruth was in the wheelchair she'd started using for longer distances since the hospital. Not because she needed it constantly, but because her knees were honest with her now in a way they hadn't always been. And Ruth had made her peace with that the same way she made peace with everything, quietly, and without ceremony, see. The chair came through the main entrance. Ruth looked up at the atrium. Glass ceiling. Morning light coming through at an angle, the kind that makes everything look like it was placed there on purpose. At the directory on the wall listing the medical clinic, the computer lab, the culinary program, the library. At the people already moving through the space, families and elderly residents and teenagers who had wandered in because the door was open, and open doors in East Side meant something. At the sign above the entrance that she'd seen in photographs but not yet in person. Caleb Orbaford Community Center. She didn't say anything. She reached up without looking and found his hand, squeezed once. That was enough. That was more than enough. The first 6 months moved fast and slow at the same time, the way new things always do when they're also real things. The medical clinic opened the same day as the building and was full within a week. Dr. Carol Waverly, the clinic director, told Caleb at the end of the first month that they had already seen more patients, but project for the entire quarter, which was a good problem and also a problem that needed solving, and they began working on it together. The computer lab on the second floor had a waiting list within 2 weeks. 40 adults registered for the first digital literacy cohort. The instructor, a retired IT manager named Gerald, who had volunteered before Caleb had even finished asking, ran the patience of Sejionzibo, believed that learning something new at 60 was not just possible, but important. The culinary program started slower, 3 students in the first week, then 7, then 14. Once word got around that the commercial kitchen was real and the certification was real, and the instructor, a woman named Pat, who had released ranked or EM operation for 20 years before her knees gave out, was the kind of teacher who expected something from you and let you know it. By month 4, Pat had a waiting list too. Caleb walked the building every evening before closing, not because he had to, because it is his community, and these were his people, and the work of seeing them, actually seeing them every single day, was the most important work he did. Some evenings, the walk took 20 minutes. Some evenings, it took an hour because someone stopped him in the hallway to tell him something. About a job they'll gotten through the training program. About a diagnosis the clinic had caught early. About a grandchild who was using the study spaces after school and coming home with their grade. The page. He listened to all of it, filed none of it away, let it land. Big Ray Okafor expanded his catering operation that fall. He'd been thinking about it for years. The logistics were complicated and the margins thin, and every time he'd almost decided, something came up, and it didn't happen. What changed was the culinary training program on the second floor. 6 graduates in the first cohort. All of them trained. All of them certified. All of them looking for work. Ray hired 4. The other 2 he helped place with restaurants across town that owed him favors. The catering side of Denton's turned a profit in its second month. He told Caleb about it on a Tuesday morning, standing at the counter of the diner before the breakfast rush, the same way he'd been standing at that counter for years. 4 people, Ray said. I'm paying 4 people now who weren't getting paid before. That's good, Ray. It is good. He poured his own coffee, set the pot down. You did a thing, Caleb. The program did a thing. Ray looked at him with the expression of a man who has watched someone grow from a 16-year-old dishwasher into something he doesn't quite have language for yet. Don't do that, Ray said. Do what? Give it away before you've even held it. Caleb was quiet. Ray picked up the coffee pot, got back to work. Some people communicate in silences that mean things. Ray had been doing it since the first morning. He nodded at Caleb coming through the back door. Brenda opened the coffee window in October. It wasn't supposed to be more than a small thing. A cart in the lobby, really, serving coffee and pastries to people waiting for clinic appointments or coming off the morning job training session. Except Brenda had been making coffee for people at Denton's for 22 years, and she understood something about that most people didn't, which was that was never really about the coffee. It was about the having somewhere to be. The cart became a standing operation within 2 weeks, then a counter, then a corner with 4 tables and mismatched chairs that Brenda sourced from estate sales and painted herself on Saturday mornings. Each chair a different color, each one solid, each one chosen because it looked like it had already lived a life and had more living left in it. People came in for coffee and stayed, talked, introduced themselves to the person sitting 3 feet away, found out that the woman next to them was also waiting for the diabetes management class and also lived on the same block and also had a grandchild at Jefferson High. The center's intake coordinator told Caleb in November that the coffee window was responsible for their highest program enrollment numbers. Not the marketing materials, not the outreach events, the coffee. Because people are not problems to be solved. They are people who need somewhere comfortable to sit for a few minutes before they can figure out what kind of help they need. Brenda had known that for 22 years. The center just gave her a bigger room and more chairs. Javon showed up on a Thursday afternoon in December. Caleb was in his office reviewing the quarterly numbers, which were better than projected, when he heard a knock on the open door. Javon, wearing the look Caleb recognized, the one that meant he wanted to say something requiring him to temporarily set aside his natural inclination toward sarcasm. "I signed up for the coding program," Javon said. Caleb looked up. "Which?" "The Thursday evening one. Fundamentals. 12 weeks. Javon crossed his arms. "Uncross them. Don't make it weird." "I'm not making it weird. You're doing the face." "What face?" "The face where you're trying not to look pleased with yourself." "I'm not pleased with myself. I'm pleased with you." "That's worse." "Javon, I just came to tell you." He backed toward the door. "Don't make a speech about it." "I wasn't going to make the speech." "Good," he pointed. "Don't." He left. Caleb waited until he heard the elevator. Then he allowed himself to smile at the quarterly report for about 10 seconds. Then he went back to work. The article came out on a Tuesday morning in February. Caleb was in the medical clinic for the weekly staff meeting when his phones started going. 3 texts from the foundation's communications director. 2 missed calls from Principal Dawson. 1 from Adaize, which meant it was already serious because Adaize did not call about things that weren't serious. He stepped into the hallway, opened the Harlow Gazette app. The headline read, "Wu really owns the Ford Center." He read it standing in the corridor outside the clinic. People moving around him, the building busy with morning appointments and the breakfast crowd at Brenda's car, and the sounds of Gerald's computer class starting up on the second floor. Gwen Lattimore had written a clean piece. That was the frustrating thing about it. She wasn't wrong about the facts she had assembled. The Briggs Foundation had funded the construction. The foundation held contractual authority over several program areas. Sis Simpson's had been Walter's man before Caleb who had him removed. The initial community board had been appointed rather than elected. All of that was true. The question she was asking, who actually runs this place and who does it actually serve, was a fair question. He finished reading, stood in the hallway another minute, thought about what Walter would do. What Walter would probably suggest, which was to crowd the response through the foundation's communications team, issue a statement. Let the lawyers look at the language before anything went out, which would take 2 weeks and cost the center 2 weeks of credibility it couldn't afford to lose right now. He called Gwen Lattimore directly. "This is Gwen. This is Caleb Ford. I read your article." A brief pause. "Mr. Ford, I'd like to invite you into the center. Come for 3 days. Talk to whoever you want. I'll give you access to the program data, the financial statements, the vendor contracts, the community board meeting minutes. Everything." Silence on her end. "Why would you do that?" she said, not skeptical, genuinely asking. "Because your questions are fair," he said, "and the answers are better than your current story." Another pause. 3 days. Starting Thursday if you want. He could hear her thinking. "All right," she said. He did not call Walter before the interview. He called him after. "I gave a reporter full access to our operational records," Caleb said. Silence on the line. "Our legal team didn't need to be involved. The records are clean. The story they tell is better than the story she was going to print." A longer silence. "Walter," Caleb said, "if we hide from a fair question, we lose the community's trust, which is the only thing that actually matters here." Quiet. "I know that," Walter said finally. His voice carried something Caleb couldn't place at first. Then he placed it. Pride. The specific pride of a man watching someone do something he couldn't have done himself. "I know that," Walter said again. "I just wouldn't have done what you did. Which is why you needed me to do it instead." Yes, quiet. "All right," Walter said. "Let me know how it goes." Gwen Lattimore spent 3 days in the building. She sat in on click appointments with patient permission. She attended 2 job training sessions. She had coffee at Brenda's corner for an hour on Friday morning, and by the end of it had spoken to 9 people, none of whom Caleb had arranged for her to meet. She talked to the woman who had gotten her GED through the literacy program, to the retired contractor teaching electrical skills to students every Tuesday, to the 81-year-old man named Harold who came in for his blood pressure check every 2 weeks and had told the clinic nurse, matter-of-factly, that he felt better now than he had at 75. She talked to Javen, who showed up for his Thursday coding class and had no idea he was talking to a reporter until Gwen introduced herself, at which point Javen had said, with complete composure, "Oh, the one who wrote the article. What did you think of the coding room? Because they need more monitors." Gwen had looked at Caleb. Caleb had shrugged. Javon was Javon. The second article ran the following Tuesday. Inside the center, that's actually working. It was not a warm piece. Gwen Lattimore did not write warm pieces. She was clear about the things still incomplete. The community board election process that needed strengthening. The medical clinic wait list that had grown faster than staffing. The culinary program that could absorb twice as many students if it had twice as many instructors. She was equally clear about what was real. Real numbers, real names. Real people whose lives were different because the building existed. The response in Harlow was not loud. It was steady, which is better. Loud fades, steady builds. Enrollment in the job training programs went up 19% in the 2 weeks after the article. The medical clinic wait list grew, which was a problem, and Caleb had already started making calls to address it before the article even came out. He sent Gwen a text. "Thank you for being fair." She wrote back, "Thank you for opening the door." He was walking through the lobby on a Thursday afternoon in March when Brenda called from behind the coffee counter. "Caleb." Her voice was doing something careful. He turned. She nodded toward the corner table by the window, the one with 2 chairs. The change she always meant when she nodded in a particular direction. 2 people at the table, a man and a woman. Young, late 20s. 2 children beside them, a girl and a boy. The girl may be 5 and the boy may be 3. Both sitting with the stillness of children who have been told to be good and are trying hard. The man was turned slightly away. The woman was looking at the table. Their clothes were neat. The kind of neat that takes extra effort. The kind that says, "We have very little, but we are not without dignity, and we would like you to see that." Caleb walked over. Their names were Darnell and Sonia Webb. He was 26. She was 24. They had been in Harlow for 3 come from Louisville after Darnell's construction job ended, and a cousin had said there was work here, which had turned out to be less true than advertised. The car had broken down that morning. Real breakdown. Not a test. Just specific cruelty of things going wrong when you can least afford it, which is also the most common time for things to go wrong. They had walked to Denton's first. Brenda had pointed them here. Darnell had his pride folded tight around him like a coat too thin for the weather. He looked at Caleb the way a man looks at someone when he's calculating what asking for help is going to cost him. Caleb recognized that look from the inside. "Sit down," Caleb said. "You want coffee?" "We're fine," Darnell said. "Brenda," Caleb called. "2 coffees and whatever the kids want." He pulled out the chair and sat down across from them. "Tell me what happened," he said. Darnell talked. Slow at first, then steadier. The car, the job situation, Louisville and the cousin, and the sense of trying to make something work in a city that didn't know their names yet. Sonia filled in the parts he left out, quietly, without making it feel like she was correcting him. They had a way of talking together that suggested they had been through enough to know how to do that. The little girl, whose name was Keely, watched Caleb through the whole conversation with dark, serious eyes. Caleb watched her back. He thought about a Tuesday night in November 8 years ago. About an elderly couple in expensive wet clothes and a plate of food and a choice that didn't feel like a choice at all, because when someone needs something and you have it, the deciding is already done. He reached into his jacket pocket, brought out a business card, turned it over to the blank side. Darnell and Sonia Webb, he said out loud, writing as he spoke. Like each word mattered. Because it did. Darnell gave his number. Caleb wrote it down. We have a facilities maintenance opening, he said. Buildings this size needs people who know what they're doing. You said construction. Electrical and general, Darnell said. Our commercial kitchen's been having ventilation problems. 3 people have looked at it. None of them fixed it. He looked at him steadily. You available Monday? Janelle's face did something complicated. Not relief exactly. Not gratitude exactly. Some closer to the moment when the ground stops moving under you, and you remember what it felt to stand still. Yes, he said. Caleb looked at Sonia. You said accounting, AP and AR for 4 years, she said, before the kids. Our programs coordinator has been asking for support staff for 2 months. He sets hard on the table between them. I can't promise either of those conversations ends in a hire, but they're real conversations with people who will treat you like adults. Sonia nodded, very still, very careful. Why are you doing this, she said, not ungrateful. Asking because she was someone who had learned to understand the cost of things before she accepted them. Caleb thought about how to answer that honestly. Someone did it for me, he said. When I was 17, I had nothing to offer, and they helped anyway. He paused. Now I have some things to offer. She looked at him for a moment. Okay, she said. Keely was still watching him with those serious eyes. Hi, Caleb said to her. She considered this then. Your name is really on the building. It is. She looked toward the lobby and the entrance she had come through. That's a big name, she said. He laughed. First real laugh of the day. Yeah, he said. It is. Darnell started Monday. Found the ventilation problem by Wednesday afternoon. It was not a complicated problem, as it turned out. The kind that looks complicated from the outside because no one has looked at it from the right angle. Darnell looked at it from the right angle, fixed it in 3 hours, and then they spent the rest of Wednesday supervising the maintenance because, he told the facilities manager, he couldn't focus when things were out of order. The facilities manager told Caleb this story while working not to smile. Sonia came in Tuesday for her meeting with the programs coordinator and did not leave until 4 in the afternoon because they'd started talking about the financial reporting system and discovered together that it could be simplified significantly if they restructured 2 processes, and Sonia had clear opinions about how to do that, and the coordinator found she agreed with most of them. The coordinator called Caleb afterward to ask if this was normal. Is she right about the restructuring? Caleb asked. Yes, then yes. It's normal. Walter and Dorothy came to Harlow in April. Not for an event, not for a board meeting. They drove up on a Wednesday morning and walked through the center the way people walk through a place they want to understand from the inside out. Not from a report. Walter had not announced the visit. He never did when it mattered. Caleb walked with them. Walter asked questions about the programs. Questions that told you he had read everything and was now checking the reading against the reality. He stopped at the culinary program and watched Pat's afternoon class for 10 minutes without saying a word. Pat noticed him standing there, assessed him in about 4 seconds, and went back to her students without breaking stride. Walter looked at Caleb. She's excellent, he said. I know, Caleb said. Did you find her, or did she find you? Brenda found her. They went to the same church. Walter nodded slowly. Like that confirmed something. Dorothy stopped for a long time at the bulletin board in the main hallway where residents posted things. Community announcements. A thank you note to the clinic staff and written on a piece of notebook paper. 2 flyers for a neighborhood block watch. And in the center of the board, a drawing from a child in the after-school program, crayon on copy paper, a building with a large sun above it, and the words, Your Place in big, uneven letters. Dorothy stood at that board for a long time. Caleb let her. Walter asked to meet in the office at 4. He came alone. Dorothy had stayed downstairs, talking to Brenda, which Caleb suspected was not accidental. Those two had figured each other out over the Denton's dinner in October, and had been in quiet correspondence ever since, a detail Caleb had only learned about by noticing Dorothy's handwriting on an envelope in Brenda's bag one afternoon. Walter sat across from the desk, looked around the office. The view out the window, the east street below, a woman walking with two kids, and an old man at the bus stop with a canvas tote bag, the ordinary afternoon business of people moving through their lives. He produced an envelope from his jacket, set it on the desk between them. This is a modification to the Foundation's operating agreement as it relates to this facility, he said. Our legal team finalized it last week. Caleb didn't reach for it yet. What does it say? It says the Caleb Ford Community Center is now an independent organization. Walter folded his hands on the desk. Your own board, your own governing documents, your own financial authority. He paused. The Briggs Foundation will remain a strategic partner. We'll provide advisory support and funding consideration for specific initiatives. But this building, these programs, this community, it's yours. Caleb looked at the envelope. Before year 5, he said. Before year 3. The room was quiet. You said you had never done this before year 5, Caleb said. I never had reason to before year 5. Walter looked at him without any of the calculation that used to live in those pale eyes. You handled Simmons better than I did. You handled the Gazette piece in a way I wouldn't have thought of. You built a community board that actually represents the community, instead of representing the idea of the community. You created programs that people use because they work, not because they're free. He paused. What exactly am I waiting for? Caleb picked up the envelope, did not open it yet. Walter. He looked across the desk at the man who had staged a breakdown in a parking lot on a November night almost 8 years ago, who had a wallet full of cash the whole time, who had written his name on a paper napkin like it was a document worth keeping. The man who paid the garage bill in South Columbus. Your father never knew what came from that afternoon? Walter was quiet. No, he said. He died in 2001, before the Foundation had done much of anything. A pause. Why? Because I've been thinking about that. Caleb looked at the envelope in his hands. About how he never got to know what it became. And I think the point is that it didn't matter to him. He did it anyway, without a guarantee, without knowing what it would turn into. He set the envelope back on the desk. That's the thing I want to remember every day I sit in this office. That you do the right thing without being promised what it becomes. Walter was looking at him, not calculating, not assessing, not checking boxes in a folder labeled candidate assessment, just looking. Sign it, Walter said. His voice was quieter than usual. It's yours. Caleb opened the envelope. Read it once, carefully, the way he read everything important. Signed. Dorothy came upstairs after. She looked at the signed documents on the desk and then at Caleb, and then at her husband, and something moved across her face that she didn't try to hide or manage. Did he cry? Caleb asked her. I'm right here, Walter said. Did he? Dorothy sat down. He will later. In the car. He always does things in the car. Dorothy. He cried in the car after he read your file the first time, she told Caleb. And after the Simmons situation. And last month when he read the 6-month program report. Those were allergies, Walter said. Ohio's in spring has very aggressive allergies, Caleb agreed. Walter looked between them. I don't know when this became a comedy, he said. Probably around the time you pretended to lose your wallet, Caleb said. A pause. Walter's mouth moved. Not quite a smile. The territory right before one. Fair, he said. Ruth's cooking class had 32 students by May. She had not been asked to teach it. She had simply started. She had wandered into the commercial kitchen one Thursday morning because Brenda had mentioned it, sat empty before 10, and Ruth had thought, well, if it's just sitting there. She called 3 neighbors. The 3 neighbors told 4 people each. By the 3rd Thursday, there were 11 people in the kitchen, and by the 6th Thursday, the center had quietly added it to the official schedule and assigned a staff member to help her. Ruth had accepted this without comment. She was not a person who required ceremony. Caleb came by one Thursday in May, stood in the doorway of the commercial kitchen and watched 32 people in aprons at prep stations while Ruth moved through the room, stopping here to adjust a grip on a knife, there to taste something and raise an eyebrow, there to say something to a 90-year-old man that made him straighten up and try the motions again with more intention. He watched her for a long time. She noticed him in the doorway eventually. "You going to stand there or put an apron on?" she said. The room laughed. He put an apron on. He stood beside her at the prep station for the last 40 minutes of the class, following her instructions without question, the way he had in her kitchen on Garfield Street. Since he was old enough to reach the counter, and it occurred to him, standing there with flour on his hands, that he had learned most of what he knew about paying attention from watching this woman cook. The way she moved through the kitchen was the same way she'd taught him to move through the world. Without waste, without rush, with full attention to whatever was directly in front of you, because that was where the work was, and the work was what mattered. After the class, after the students had cleaned their stations and filtered out with containers of what they'd made, and the sassified tiredness of people who have made something with their hands, Ruth sat at the long prom prep table with a glass of water, and Caleb sat across from her. "You know what's funny," she said. "What?" "I've been cooking my whole life, and nobody ever called it a skill." She turned the glass in her hands. "Now I've got 32 students and a waiting list, and they put me in the program schedule like I'm a real teacher." "You are a real teacher. I know that." She looked at him. "I knew it before they put me in the schedule." He smiled. "That's the point," she said. "You know what you are before the world figures it out. You just have to wait." He thought about that on the drive home. About what it meant to know what you were before the world caught up. About a woman on Garfield Street who had been a real teacher for 73 years, teaching one student at a time, without a schedule or a budget or a room with her name on the door. And how the best thing the center had done maybe was give that room a door. The file from Ms. Pruitt came on a Thursday in June. Physical file. Delivered by hand, which Miss Pruitt apparently considered more appropriate for this kind of communication than email. Inside, a student profile. Tamara Ellis, 16 years old, junior at Jefferson High, GP a 397. Honor roll every semester without exception. Works at a restaurant downtown 3 evenings a week. Gets her 2 younger siblings ready in the mornings when her mother's schedule runs early. A handwritten note from Miss Pruitt, paper-clipped to the front. Caleb. She doesn't just get good grades. She's a good person. EP. He read the file at his desk. Read it again, set it down, looked out the window at the street below. The bus stop. A group of teenagers moving through the afternoon with the loose, unhurried energy of people who don't yet know where they're going. He had walked past that bus stop 1,000 times, on the way to Denton's, on the way home from school, in the rain on the nights when one died. $75 had to go somewhere more necessary than his own transportation. He used to watch street through a 10-inch window. Now he watched from an office in a building with his name on the front. He pulled a notepad toward him. Wrote a response to Miss Pruitt. "When is she free to come in? I'd like to meet her." He set the pen down. Then picked it up again, because there was something else wise he wanted to say, and he wrote it in the margin of the note. "She sounds like the real thing. Thank you for seeing it." The scholarship letter from Javon arrived the following week. Not by phone, not by text. Javon had written an actual letter on paper, which was so unlike him that Caleb read it twice before he accepted that it was real. The letter said, in Javon's handwriting, which had not improved since 3rd grade, "I got the coding scholarship. Full ride. Starting in September. I applied in February and didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to have the conversation if I didn't get it. Now I got it, so I'm telling you. Don't make it weird." Caleb set the letter on his desk, sat with it for a while. Then he called Javon. "I got your letter," he said. "I told you not to make it weird." "I'm not making it weird. I'm calling to say congratulations. That's making it weird, Javon." You got a full scholarship, I'm aware. To study coding, also aware. After taking a 12-week course at the center, you thought I was crazy to open. A pause. Okay, Javon said. That's a little funny. A little, another pause. Longer this time. See, Javon said. His voice was different now. The sarcasm was still there, but underneath it for just a moment, something else. What you built. It's real. I want you to know I know that. Caleb didn't say anything right away. I know you know, he said finally. Okay, don't make a speech. I wasn't going to. Good. A pause. I'll see you before I leave. He hung up. Caleb sat in his office with the letter on the desk and looked out the window at the street below. The bus stop. The afternoon light going orange the way Ohio light goes in early summer. A woman walking fast with a bag on each arm. 2 kids on bikes. The ordinary business of a neighborhood that was still figuring out what it was becoming. But figuring it out. Actually working on it. That was the thing. She brought coffee up at 4:30, the way she had started doing a few months back, without asking, just appearing with a cup at the hour when the afternoon catches up with you. She set it on his desk, looked at the letter, at the note to Ms. Pruitt's still on the pad beside it said it. Another one, she said. Another one. She looked at the Tamara Ellis file with the school photo attached. Then at Javon's letter. Then at the window. You know, she said, I was there the night you bought those old folks dinner. Booth 7. I know you were. I've been thinking about it since. About what? She picked up her tray, ready to go back downstairs. About whether you knew what you were doing. I didn't know anything, Caleb said. I just stood up. She nodded, slow, like that was the answer she'd been waiting 8 years to hear confirmed. That's the thing, she said. You don't need to know. You just need to stand up. She went back downstairs. He sat at his desk as the afternoon light moved across the floor of the office. The building was still going. He could hear it through the floor. The fitness class wrapping up on the 3rd floor. Evening job training session starting in room 204. The sound of the coffee corner, which always had someone in it, no matter the hour. He clapped. He had stopped trying to explain and started accepting as evidence of some true about people and what they need. They need somewhere to be. They need to see them. That's most of it. He thought about a man in South Columbus in 1972 who would never know his name, had echoed through 50 years and 31 centers, and a building in Eastside Harlow that used to be a chain-link fence around cracked asphalt. He thought about Ruth in an Easter dress, standing up in the 3rd row before anyone else had decided to. He thought about Walter in a car somewhere on the Ohio highway dealing with his allergies. He thought about Darnell and Sonia Webb and their daughter, Keely, with the serious eyes who had looked at the building and said, that's a big name. He thought about Javon, who would leave for school in September and come back different and better and still fundamentally himself, which the best possible outcome for anyone. He thought about Tamara Ellis, 16 years old, working 3 evenings a week, getting her siblings ready in the mornings, carrying a 3. 97 GPA through all of it, because she had decided somewhere along the way that hard circumstances and impossible ones were not the same thing. He thought about what Ms. Pruitt had written in the margin. She doesn't just get good grades, she's a good person. The same thing she had known about him once. Before the building, before the scholarship, before any of it. Just a kid in a library eating a peanut butter sandwich, folding brochures into the bottom of his backpack, not yet believing what he wanted was possible. He closed the quarterly report, put on his jacket, went downstairs to walk through the building before it closed, the way he did every evening. Not because anyone expected it, not because it was on a checklist, but because it was his community, and these were his people, and the only way to keep knowing that was to keep seeing it with his own eyes. The ground floor was warm with the end of the day. The coffee corner was doing its last hour. 2 elderly women at the corner table, deep in a conversation that had been going on, Caleb suspected, since long before they sat down here. A teenager with headphones around his neck working through homework at the A2 table. Darnell crossing the lobby with a toolbox, nodding at Caleb as he passed. Caleb nodded back. He walked through the medical clinic, closed for the day, but tomorrow's appointment board was already full. He walked up to the second floor. A new coding cohort was running in the room where Javon had sat 12 weeks ago. 12 people at 12 stations, the instructor moving between them with the patient attention of someone who knows that understanding arrives differently for everyone. And your job is to be there when it does. He walked through the library. 3 people still there. 2 at study carrels. 1 asleep in the comfortable chair in the corner, a book open on his chest, and the staff had long ago decided that someone who fell asleep in the library had found what they needed, and it wasn't anyone's job to interrupt it. He came back down to the lobby, stood at the main entrance, outside, east side at evening, the light going the particular orange of Ohio summers. People at the bus stop, a kid on a bike, the general sound of a neighborhood that was still finding out what it was going to be. He thought about what Ruth had said in the kitchen. You know what you are before the world figures it out. You just have to wait. He thought about a 17-year-old boy standing in a parking lot on a November night with a business card in his hand, and future he couldn't look at directly yet. He thought about what it meant to stand up without knowing what you were standing up into. He locked up at 8:30, drove down Garfield Street on the way home the way he always did, because Garfield Street was still his street, still his way of remembering where he came from and what it cost and what it was worth. The house had new paint now, soft gray, Ruth's choice, with white trim around the windows. The porch steps had been fixed the previous spring, solid now, no more sagging in the middle. The windows were properly sealed, same house, better bones. The porch light wasn't. Ruth was in her recliner. He could see her through the window. He parked, sat for a moment, then got out, went up the steps, opened the door. The oxygen tank hummed beside her. The television was on, but not really watched. The room smelled like whatever she had made for dinner and left covered on the stove for him. How was your day, baby? She said. He sat down across from her. Good, he said. Really good. She looked at him over the tops of her glasses. Waiting. He thought about everything that had happened since he walked this house at 17 with 1 in 17. 5 no at the pop and walked back to it tight with a signed envelope in his jacket that said the center was his to run. He thought about all the miles in between. Tell me, she said. So he did. The measure of a man is not what he does when the world is watching. It's what he does when all it has is a warm meal and someone who needs it more.